All right, in this lecture, we're going to break the face down into simple geometrical forms. So just like all images can be broken down into simple 2D shapes like we saw in previous lectures, we can also break everything down into simple geometrical forms. So let's go ahead and try this. So first off, we're going to start off with the nose. So the nose is basically a number 7. A lot of people like to think of it that way from the side, but there's a lot more to it than that. So first, let's go ahead and create sort of a cube shape that will represent our nose. So this is the first shape that the nose can be broken down into. So we got one plane right there, another one right here, which kind of tapers off as you get to the top, and then this one right here. So it's sort of a cube shape, but it has more of rounded edges and it has some more tapering. So it tapers off towards the top here, it tapers off towards the top here, and it also tapers off on this plane towards the top. Now you may not see where the form of the nose is right here, but we're going to take it a step further and add that form in. So from here, you could go ahead and draw your nose. So you would put one nostril right here, let's say, and then you could put another nostril right here. So maybe like so. All right, so there are our nostrils. We can go ahead and fill those in with some shadow. And then next, you could go ahead and add the top part of the nostril. So there'd be top part right here. And then you would add the tip of your nose right here. And then you could go ahead and add a little bit more of a shape to your nose and more of a rounded bottom here. All right, so now we have a lot more form in our nose, a lot more organic form at least, and now we can go ahead and add in some highlights and shadows to that to take it a step further. So on this bottom area, we would have a shadow, so let's go ahead and add in that shadow. And this is saying that our light source is coming from the top and hitting it coming down like so. So we can go ahead and add in shadow there. And then this round area of the nose is going to be where our shadow starts to soften into our highlight. And then we can also add shadow on this side or this plane of our nose. And then since this is the top area of that part of the nose, it's probably going to be getting hit by a little bit of light also. And then we can go ahead and add in a little bit darker shadows in there too. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a darker shadow right there. Add in a darker shadow here. Just like so. And I'm going to stretch that nostril out a little bit more. Same with this one. I'm going to stretch it over a little bit more. And then we can add a little bit more shadow over here. All right, perfect. And then, like we said before, I explained how noses create cast shadows. So we want to make sure that we add a cast shadow to this. So we're going to go ahead and add that cast shadow right there. And just to keep this simple for now, I'm going to only do the nose and I'm going to leave the lips out, but really there should be lips underneath this nose that the cast shadow is being cast onto. All right, great. So now we have a nose. Now that's not a perfect nose by any means, but I just wanted to get the point across that there is form in everything, including the human face. Now let's try something else. So if we go back to our eye drawing, if you remember, we had our eye. So our eye was something like so. And obviously our eye is a sphere, and so you can basically add the shadow and highlight in like a sphere. But what I want to show you is I want to show you the form on this brow piece above the eye. So we would have our eyebrow probably somewhere about here. All right. But then this brow piece, it also has some form. So basically a brow piece comes out, if we're looking at it from the side, it comes out like so, and then it goes back into the cavernous part of the eye where the eyeball is held, and then we have the cheekbone. And so we need to create this form up here, right here. So what does that look like in simple geometrical form? Well, it's basically a shape like this. So we have one plane like this, and it kind of curves around like so. That's our eyelid right there. And then we have a plane like this. I'm going to draw this in really lightly. And then we have in another plane like that. And then that all sort of smooths out like so. Then we have a top surface like this. So I'm going to go ahead and erase away my eyebrows so you can see what's going on here a little bit better. But basically, this area right here is going to get filled in with shadow. Now, depending on the person, this shape can be different, but basically this is the basic overall idea of the form of the brow piece. And this area tends to get a little bit darker depending on where your light source is coming from, and in this case the light source is coming from the top. And this area will get a little bit lighter. And then this surface is going to be our highlight area, and so we're going to leave that highlighted. But then we can go ahead and start blending this all in together so it has a nice smoother transition. And then we can go ahead and just add in our eyelid really quick. And you see how you can take a organic form and then, you can see how you can take a geometric form and then take it into more of an organic shape, which is very important when you're creating artwork. If you don't understand how to do that, it's going to be very difficult for you to create things out of your head. But we won't get back into how to draw the human eye. We'll just stick with the brow for now. But now you can see we just created that brow from that geometrical form. Now let's try one more thing. Let's try the human head itself. So the human head can be broken down into a very basic shape. So first it's broken down into a sphere. But then on that sphere you have the front flat part of the face. So we can go ahead and add that shape in like so. And it basically smooths into the actual sphere itself. So now we can go ahead and erase away that area. But then we want to connect this area, which is going to be the jawline, into here, like so. And then we can go ahead and erase that. And so basically we have a shape like this that's connecting into our sphere. And that makes up the basic human shape of the head. So let's go ahead and add in some highlight and shadow to this. So if I have a light right here and it's shining down, like so, I can go ahead and add in my core shadow. So I'm going to add in core shadow on this side. And right along this edge, it can be a little bit more of a harder edge. But as we get up to our actual sphere, we want that to begin to soften a lot. So it's going to soften into our mid-tone shadow. Like so. But now we have the basic shape of the human form. You can even add a neck in there if you wanted to. Oops, that's a really skinny neck. Let me redo that. So you could add a neck in there. You could even add the chest area, which would basically be a rectangular cube, which then you could round off and add more form to it to create the correct human form. But basically what I want you to see is that everything can be broken down into basic geometrical shapes. And usually, just like when you're drawing an image where you start with your basic shapes, then I want you to break it down into more of geometrical forms. So let's say this is our character, okay? Well, now I want you to break that down into more geometrical forms. And so what you would do is you would turn this square into more of a cube, let's say. So it's more three-dimensional. And you could turn this into a cube too. And then let's say his hands were down here, and you could turn those into more spheres and add the shadowing to it depending on where the light was coming from. But I want you to start viewing things as geometrical forms. So once you start seeing things as shapes, the next step is to start seeing things as geometrical forms. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, you learned how to break the human face down into geometrical forms. In the next one, we're gonna go ahead and create a landscape drawing out of geometrical forms. So you just have one more example of how to break things down into geometrical forms and start from geometrical forms when you begin your drawings. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.